and welcome to Both Sides Book Club. You're with Debbie
and Catie, and can you believe that we are on our 26th episode?
I know. So that's a year. We're 1 year old. Hooray!
1 year old with Both Sides Book Club. So thank you so much, absolutely, to everybody that has been supporting us and following us for the last year. And thank you to all of the readers out there. If you have read all 26 books, then congratulations.
Give yourself a big clap on the back.
Yes, you did. You read 26 books in a year. And we read 26
and counting.
A couple more. Congratulations.
Thank you. So to celebrate our 26th episode and our first birthday, we have got an absolute cracker for you. We hope that you've been enjoying it as much as we have. So our book is The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex. And so tell us more about it.
So for a bit of a recap for anybody that has read it or didn't read it and would like to read it, this book is a mystery novel and it follows two timelines, one in 1972 and 20 years, and the other timeline 20 years later. So it follows the disappearance of three men that are lighthouse keepers, and then it flips to the timeline of this author that's wanting to understand a little bit more about what happened with this disappearance and is interviewing the wives. So it is very interesting. So it's not just a mystery. As all of our Both Sides Book Club books, we do not just choose something that is, just one themed. It is multifaceted.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lots to talk about. And there are just so many layers to this book, which I think was absolutely fascinating.
Before we dive into talking a little bit about the book and unpacking it, I think what's really interesting is to understand a little bit about the author, Emma Stonex.
Yeah. So Emma Stonex is an author based in the UK. Now, The Lamplighters is not her first novel, but it is her first novel written under her own name. Emma used to work in publishing, and she's actually written 7 novels before this, different kind of genres, but she's always written them under a pseudonym. So almost as though she was kind of like practicing, putting on different writing styles, different personas, until she wrote this novel. And this novel was really, really important to her.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that I think through lots of different creative practices, and there's kind of two parts to this. In our last book that we read, I found it amazing that the author was a screenwriter, right? And so she had a different set of skills to be able to look at her own work. And when we spoke to her about, would she ever make her book into a film, she was like, oh, yeah, we've already been brainstorming that. So I found it really interesting that Emma Stonex had been in publishing because, when we speak to a lot of our authors, they go through this series of going, oh yeah, I sent it to my publisher and we had to change a whole bunch and a whole bunch and a whole bunch and a whole bunch. And so I just was like wondering, how could you imagine the complexity of looking at your work through a creative and then also like having to edit it? I know you did a little bit of an editing course.
Yeah. I was actually listening to an interview that Emma Stonex gave, and they were asking exactly that question. And I think, I think that she said in a way it almost made it easier because as an editor, you don't expect to receive kind of like a fully formed manuscript. It's never actually perfect, whereas I think authors perhaps think that that they have to hand in something that's completely polished. But it's actually the editor's job to obviously to correct spellings and punctuation and so on, but to look at the storyline and polish the manuscript.
Yeah, right.
So that it gets to, the best that it possibly can be, in order to be published. So Emma was actually saying that she, in fact, it almost gave her the freedom for it not to be completely formed.
That's cool. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's really interesting because I do feel that. And I think a lot of the time, even in my work, I feel a lot of pressure to hand over something like fully formed.
Yeah.
Because you're so nervous that it's not going to be understood properly or that you just need to get it all out. So I think, that could have been really helpful. Although I wonder how many drafts she had to do.
I don't know. I don't know. That's a question we'd have to ask her.
If you're editing as you're going, I wonder how many drafts that you'd have to redraft and redraft.
But I think sort of what I started to allude to earlier was that this is Emma's first book written under her own name, and it's a really, really important book for her. She first conceived of the book 7 years before she started to write it, and it was something that was just germinating in her brain, and it was a story that she really, really wanted to tell. And of course, if you've been following for the last couple of weeks, or if you know a little bit about the book, you'll know that the book was inspired by a true event. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so in the 1900s, there actually was a disappearance of 3 lighthouse keepers. And in the author's note, I'll actually just read the author's note just because I think it's important way to start. So in the author's note, it says, in December 1900, the 3 lighthouse keepers disappeared from a remote rock light on the island of
Eileen Moore
on the outer
Hebrides.
I have to rely on Mum to translate the Scottish English islands for me. Their names were Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur. The Lamplighters is inspired by and written in respectful memory of this event, but the work is of fiction, therefore bears no resemblance to these men's lives or their characters. So there actually was this disappearance, which I find fascinating because it's still not solved.
No.
The people still have no idea how on earth these men
happened to them.
Went missing. And no bodies were found, and it's just, it's crazy. Even though it is, Emma obviously has written fiction here. Yeah. There are a few things that link the two. For example, I found it really interesting that the clocks actually were set in real life.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. At 8:45, so 8:45. So that actually was a true thing. So when they went into the lighthouse, the clocks were like that.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's super weird.
Yeah.
And then also the other thing that Emma plays is that there's all these like false sightings. So basically in all the periodicals or the newspapers of the time, there's all these people that have gone, oh, I think I saw this person, or I think I saw that. And
well, that often tends to happen, doesn't it, with famous missing people?
You're like, oh, I swear I just saw that person. And I don't know, I find that so fascinating how we, like, humans are so good with their imaginations that we feel like we can imagine seeing someone, and you get like a glimpse, or like, oh, I definitely saw that. So that was that I found really interesting. And then also that the doors were locked from the insides. That also was,
well, that hence the whole locked room mystery is that it's the impossible puzzle. You know, how could these men have disappeared when nobody could get in and they couldn't get out?
Exactly. So the one thing that Emma does, she does many things that sets these two stories apart, but the main thing is that she changes the time period.
Yeah.
So instead of it being in the early 1900s, it's in 1972. And when you listen to Emma Stonex talk a little bit about why she decided to do that, first, she felt that it would be insensitive to write a book that's exactly, I mean, these because it is a true event, there are families,
and the mystery has never actually been solved.
There are families that have lost, people and loved ones through this event. So out of respect, she decided to change the time period, but also because in 1972, there was a change with, not 1972, after the 1970s, there was a change in the way that the lighthouses were run.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating in that I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was the late 1980s when the last lighthouse in the UK became automated. So lighthouse keepers were no more. And today, of course, all over the world, they are all automated. But so in the 1970s, apparently, as the lighthouse keeper role was starting to be phased out, there was quite a lot written about lighthouse keepers.
Light was fading out.
I know. Lots of journals and biographies from lighthouse keepers. And Emma extensively researched a lot of these accounts in order to be able to depict the life of these lighthouse keepers. And wasn't that an interesting part of the book?
I think there's so much fascination between like so many people with lighthouses. You know, they have this. It's like Mum and I were talking about this previously, that it's not nostalgia for lighthouses, but everybody almost has this romanticized idea about the lighthouse. I know if you talk to me about a little lighthouse keeper, I'm imagining like a small little lighthouse on a headland with a guy with little glasses and a red beanie, and he comes out with his lamp. There's a whole
series of children's books.
Yeah.
Wasn't there? Did anyone read those? A beautiful series of picture books, but I think they were actually called The Lighthouse Keeper, and it was exactly that, the red and white striped lighthouse.
With a little lamp, and goes up, and he's
smoking a pipe.
Yes, exactly, and lights the lamp. Or even, what's that? There's that movie that recently came out, based on another book that
The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And that was, it had turbulence in it, but it was still beautiful and romanticized. Yeah. And you kind of imagine this life of a lighthouse keeper going out and looking out into the ocean and watching the sunrise and helping all these people. But again, beautiful thing about fiction is it gives you a perspective that you perhaps hadn't thought of.
Yeah. And
you go, oh, gee whiz. That actually sounds pretty isolating.
Totally. And this Emma chose to for the mystery or like the story to happen not on a lighthouse on an island, but actually in a rock in the middle of the ocean. So the only way on or off was by boat. So, there was no strolling about the island.
No veggie garden.
No sheep, no romantic sort of lifestyle. It was literally when the keepers were in the lighthouse, they were in the lighthouse. And the rooms were all curved. And even the beds.
Yeah.
Even the beds had to fit around the circular walls of the lighthouse. And I think, the discipline of these men, I had actually never really thought about that. I guess because, we do have this romantic notion of it, but the reason there were three of them is that somebody always had to be on watch, and the light constantly had to be tended, and all of these jobs had to be done, and these guys, three of them, would be living together in a very, very small space for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks at a time.
Yeah, not able to exercise, except for going for little up and down the stairs. Eating tinned, canned things. I actually read this and felt somewhat like, oh gosh, they're in quarantine in the 1970s. How at the moment so many of us have had to go through quarantine periods of 2 weeks and not been able to exercise and living in a tight quarters with, your loved ones. And it made me go, oh, wow. Okay, that would have been really, really, really challenging. And so I guess what I wanted to talk about a little bit was the fact that I think there's two schools of thought. One is obviously in Emma's writing, it is so beautiful the way that she has tied it. You can tell that she's got a love for the ocean.
Very much so.
And you can see, I feel like
her writing is just absolutely exquisite when she's writing about the ocean.
Yeah. And I think being an ocean lover myself and understanding a lot about the ocean and how the waves move, I really felt like the men's emotions and how they were feeling going through these different days was a metaphor for how the ocean moves.
Yeah, the two were linked.
It were linked. You know, some days you have this beautiful still day, the ocean's really glassy, you could take a boat out, you could go do whatever, and some days for the men in the lighthouse, it's just still, it's quiet, nothing's really happening, it's peaceful. And then some days there's little surges, and then some days there's a big tremonstrous crashing waves.
And other days it's
chaos.
foggy.
Yeah, and other days it's foggy, and I thought that was really beautiful. So I really loved reading the way that Emma picked the ocean.
Yeah, I think one of the characters talks about it in the book, you know, the kind of personality, the kind of person who would choose to become a lighthouse keeper. And I found that was absolutely fascinating, because you would have to be somebody who was disciplined, self-disciplined, somebody who didn't mind the isolation and the loneliness, but also someone who would actually have to get on with other people, because you'd have to, you're in such close quarters.
But that's what I found interesting about the relationship between the men, is they were friendly, but I felt like they didn't have, like, they had teamwork in a practical way, but not in a, like, it's not like they came together and they were a family, you know? And it made me kind of think a little bit more about the way that different people, I guess, deal, like exactly what you're saying, different personalities, but also the way that different people deal with isolation and the way that they get on with things, you know? And I think the beauty of this book, as well as with the dual timelines of the wives 20 years later, you also see how they have suffered from isolation as well. Because I was thinking when I read this book, do I think that I could have a partner that would do time like that in quarantine, like in a quarantine environment?
Well, what it reminds me of is, you know, fly in, fly out.
Yeah, FIFO.
FIFO workers, where, you know, they are, whether it's the man or the woman, because obviously both work away at different times, is really sort of brought that to mind in that whilst we'll assume that it's the guy who's working away. So, you know, the women had the children, they had the house, they actually had to go on with the day-to-day living and organize everything and do that and be in charge and be in control, whilst the guys are off doing their specialized job, but in a very sort of rarefied environment, a very sort of controlled environment. Yeah. But then they come home and everything has to shift.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, with the FIFO, I think from what I've heard, I'm lucky I don't have a partner that does FIFO, but from what I've heard from lots of accounts from friends, because I've got lots of friends that do FIFO, is, you know, at least that way they're going into a new community, whereas this is like a very specialized, going to the lighthouse is a new community, I guess, but it is so restricted.
Incredibly so.
And then you kind of see when they come back home and the wives are trying to make sure that everything's perfect and they have their last meal and it's all set up for them to feel welcomed back. I just was like, oh, would you get like a bit of PTSD or like just this adjustment to having to go from only speaking to 3 people and not being able to leave your house to then having kids at home and friends. And
having to be a complete,
could you imagine?
having to be a different person.
Yeah, you would.
I think that would be incredibly difficult. And we see that. I mean, Emma, writes that beautifully. We really do see that. I think the character of Helen, who is Arthur, the head keeper's wife, at some point mentions that, is that, she both welcomes him coming home, but also she resents it because she also has to behave differently when he's home, and you can kind of see those tensions playing out. Whereas Jenny, Bill's wife, is far more needy, it seems, and bases her whole life on when Bill is going to be home, which of course then puts the pressure on Bill also.
On Bill, yeah, it does. It's very interesting relationship dynamic, and I think the thing that what I was kind of saying before that Emma does so beautifully is that she shows how isolation can impact lots of different people in different ways. Yes, of course, the men are physically isolated and they're going through their experience too, but the wives are feeling isolated in themselves as well because they're left with having to just get on with life. I think the thing that you see with Helen is this beautiful, beautiful world that Emma... Well, not beautiful world that Emma paints, but beautiful person that she creates, is that you can see that Helen's pain of losing her child has made her feel incredibly isolated.
Very much so.
So we've got this contrast of Arthur, who's physically isolated, and also he lost his child too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's going through an emotional isolation.
And he blames himself and knows that Helen subconsciously also blames him. So that creates the chasm between them that they can't breach.
Exactly. And then you see these chapters of Helen just feeling so isolated and interested in Bill, because I think it's a way to escape her isolation. So it's you've done a great job, Emma, because it's really you've played with lots of different complex and lots of emotions.
Yeah, and I think a far more simplistic. I know again from having read interviews that Emma has given, that she struggled for a long time to be able to put all of those individual voices. So if you haven't actually read the book yet, it's not really a spoiler in that we have 6 voices in the book. So we have each of the 3 lighthouse keepers, and then we also have each of the 3 women told at various points. And the whole story comes together, obviously, towards the end. We have all of these different voices adding layers and filling in the gaps of the story. I know that Emma struggled with particularly trying to find the women's voices, because they're told in the first person as though they're actually giving an interview.
Recounts, yeah.
But I think it actually works really, really well to give all of those differing points of view. And I think, how did you feel about the fact that the women actually weren't really friends, in the rather than them all kind of coming together in their grief when the lighthouse keepers go missing, it actually fractures them. Did you think that was plausible? Did you think that was a good way of doing it?
I think so, because I feel like I am going a little bit in circles, so I apologize to everybody, but it is quite a complex book, and I'm trying just to remember how I felt with each, because as Mum says, it does follow these 6 voices, and all of them are very well-rounded characters. There's not a single character that I feel like doesn't have an emotional backstory, which I think Emma did really, really well. But I think the fact that they are so fractured again pays tribute to this different way that people can feel isolated. You know, some people can go through trauma and have to cling, and you see that with Jenny and Bill. Like, she's trying to cling on to him.
Yeah.
But through the horrible incident of her husband's disappearance, the way that she responds to that is to
pull back.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think it's really plausible because there is no format to how one should grieve or how one should
come to terms,
you know, and to be
with something that's open-ended.
With something that's so open-ended. And you can imagine, you know, similarly how we were talking a few books back about if something's unsolved, how that can play on people's minds.
Yeah, there's no resolution.
There's no resolution. And I think that's what you see. And perhaps reaching out to them, to the other women, to create a relationship is perhaps too painful if they haven't had any sort of resolution. So, yeah, I did think it was extremely plausible because, you know, not all things have a happy ending. And as much as, you know, I'm 100% for us women all sticking together and, you know, bonding through, sometimes it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen that way. And we're only people, and sometimes we go through things really internally.
Yeah, and I guess the reason for them being friends in the first place, i.e. the fact that their husbands were working together, is removed. So, you know, there really isn't that glue, perhaps, for them, that common
thing anymore. And I guess because they weren't on the lighthouse with them, they weren't in that relationship with the men when they were there.
Yeah.
You can understand that if once they're gone, what's left? There's.
Emma introduces, quite aside from the story of the lighthouse keepers, Emma also sort of introduces a vaguely sort of supernatural element into the story on the lighthouse. What did you think about that? With the flying of the birds and the shadowy figure that comes in. Do you think that worked, or do you think that was kind of a bit superfluous?
I think it worked in the way that she writes.
Yeah.
You know, but it could have been a bit superfluous. But I feel like because she has this like beauty in describing the ocean and all the natural elements, I felt like it worked. It allowed you to sort of, your imagination to play a little bit on, and probably gave like a little bit of softness to what is quite an intense, emotional book.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that, you know, it kind of actually fitted with the whole mythology of seafarers and the sea and the albatross.
And there's so much in Scotland with the water.
Well, exactly. I mean, you know, because obviously seafarers are very superstitious.
Yeah. You know a bit about seafarers, don't you?
So I kind of felt that added that element of the unknown to the story.
Yeah.
And also, I guess, in a way, I kind of saw it as a bit of a metaphor of the fact that all of the guys were going slightly insane. Being stuck there, that, you know, they began to see and hear things.
That's true.
And was it real? Was it imagined?
Yeah,
was it some sort of supernatural thing? So I thought it worked really well.
For our Aussie audience, what is a seafarer? Because I feel like
a sailor, someone who goes to sea for a living.
I just thought I would put that out there. So yeah, I thought it was a really good book. As I sort of said in my check-in, I'm not normally one that goes for a historic based book, but it is really beautiful. So I encourage people that are like me and don't like historic books. It's not really a historic book. It is much more a locked room mystery mystery murder? Locked room? What's the technical term?
A locked room mystery.
A locked room mystery.
Yes. And I'm actually going to take exception that you're calling it a historical novel.
Why?
It was set in 1972.
Oh,
I was born and alive.
But it was based on an event that was happening. That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
are the 1970s history?
Oh, shut up. I don't mean it that way. I just meant that it was inspired by a historic event.
It was, yeah.
You know,
and
sometimes I feel like when that happens, it can be, for my tastes, a little bit too like,
in the past.
In the past,
yes.
But it's not. This book is amazing. It's really a mystery, and it's really really interesting to read.
Yes, and you may or may not find out what happened.
Yes. We will see.
We will see.
So,
okay.
Shall we move on to May?
Yes.
Cannot believe we're in May.
I know.
Oh my goodness me.
So for May, because Mother's Day is coming up,
yes.
And we'll let you know some more details about that later, we have chosen 2 books about being a mother, about motherhood.
Yes. And also because we're expecting the little...
And also because we're expecting
the little Chino to come out.
Absolutely. So our first book for May is called The Funny Thing About Norman Foreman by Juliette Henderson. So Juliette is an Australian author, and this book is just delightful. It's just such a gorgeous book. The basic storyline is that Sadie is a single mother, and her son Norman Foreman has a best friend called Jax, and together the boys kind of have a comedy duet, and their ambition is to go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and perform sometime within the next 5 years. However, and again, it's not a spoiler, Jax dies, and Norman is left as a bereaved 12-year-old who doesn't know which way is up, which way is down. So Sadie develops a plan to get Norman to the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, and it's just lovely.
It's gorgeous. The voice from the voices from both of them are just so beautiful. It's really, really nice.
Yeah.
So again, change of pace, and we are so excited for you to read this one with us in May. So we'll chat to you very soon. Again, happy birthday to us.
Yeah.
And congratulations to everybody that has read 26 books. We are very, very proud of you.
And absolutely. And we will talk to you very soon.
All right, everybody. Bye.
Happy reading. We hope you enjoyed watching this episode.
If you did, please leave us a comment below. We'll see you soon.